So here are the 10 largest dividend yield companies on the ASX 200. They are all over 8% dividend yield, which is crazy. But is a high dividend yield alone enough? We'll jump into the computer and have a look to see if the dividends are stable, to see if the price is rising, but these are the top 10 highest dividend yields. But I've got to warn you, dividend yield isn't the only thing you have to look at because sometimes it can be inflated. So some of the reasons that a dividend yield might look higher than normal is that the stock price has recently fallen. And because you use the current stock price and the last 12 months of dividend payouts to determine what the yield is, if the stock price falls before they've paid any more dividends, it can make the yield look artificially high. So that's something to keep in mind. And of course, another thing, as I always say, you need consistent dividends and you need them to be growing over time. And lastly, you do actually want to make sure that the company stock price is going up over the long term because you don't want to make money on the dividends, but lose money on the overall value of the stock. That's why you need to look at more than just the dividend yield alone. So let's jump into the computer and do some research. So here are the top 10 highest dividend yields on the ASX 200. At the top, at the highest amount we've got in the ASX 200 is Magellan Financial Group at 15%, which is a crazy high dividend. And we go all the way down to 8.1%, which is still super high for Fletcher Building. But let's go and look at these in more detail. So let's look at the highest dividend yield company on our list first to determine whether it's actually a good investment. Now, it's got a high dividend yield, we know that. It's 85% franked, but as you can see, the dividends have been falling, they're not consistent, and the stock price is also falling. So it might not be such a good investment. Now, let's compare that to the second highest dividend yield company on our list. So Woodside Energy, they're 100% franked, they've got a 12% dividend yield, and the dividends do seem to be increasing. And they do have an upcoming dividend, which the ex-dividend date is on the 8th of this month. Take that information as you will. And the stock price is going up over the last 5 years. So compared to the first company, this is a much better consideration. But let's look at the rest on our list, which had high dividends, but they're reducing the dividends or they're inconsistent in paying out. Whitehaven didn't pay in 2021, and while it still seems pretty high right now, I'd like to see it going further, what it might do. Fortescue Metals is another popular one. Again, their dividends seem to be falling. They seem to be going down. And another inconsistent one, Coronado Global. They don't have a consistent schedule. They paid pretty decently in 2022, but the first dividend in 2023 is really tiny. And even though it's 100% franked, I don't know what it's going to do for the rest of the year. It's too inconsistent for me to know. And now let's look at some that have high dividends and they seem to be consistent in paying out, but the stock price is falling. I've said this before, you don't want to make money on the dividends, yet the stock price is falling over time because that cancels each other out. So Fletcher Building is one. They've dropped over 27% in the last 5 years. And same with Cromwell Property. Now Cromwell Property, they pay a good dividend, but they've fallen over 31% over the last 5 years. Now let's look at some that have high dividends and they actually might be okay. So we have New Hope, a dividend yield of 11.8%. Franking is 100%. The dividends have been super high in 2022, and I'm hoping they'll be the same in 2023. And of course, the price has been increasing. They've increased 149%. Now, Harvey Norman is one that's doing not much. In their upcoming dividend, it looks like they may have dropped slightly, although I would like to see the final dividend before I make a complete judgment. Also, the ex-dividend date hasn't reached yet, so that's the 31st of March if you're watching this before that date. But they've only increased about 3% over the last 5 years. They're not an awful company, but they're not doing great things either. And BHP is another mining group, so it's very cyclical. You'll see that in the chart. Its upcoming dividend seems pretty consistent, especially comparing it to 2021. So I would say that the final dividend will be much higher when they pay that in September. And if you look at the chart over the last 5 years, they've actually done decently over the last 5 years. They've increased 56%. And as you can see from the chart, they're quite cyclical. They go up and down quite a lot. Out of all of them, I probably like Woodside Energy the most. It's the most consistent and it has increased the most. So make sure you go and do any more research on these companies if you're interested in any of them. But those are the highest dividend yields in the ASX 200 at the moment. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. Take care and happy investing.